Hi there. This video is intended to teach you how to use one of the apps on your iPad. It's a very powerful app for graphing. So instead of graphing data on paper, on graph paper, you can do it digitally on your iPad and be able to manipulate it very easily and also save it, take a screenshot, import it into a lab you might be doing for your science class. It's a very powerful software you guys have built in from the district. So if you just search on your iPad for Graphical, it's an app called Graphical. If you just type that in, you should see the application, Graphical GW. It's by Vernier. If you don't, simple fix. All you have to do is go to self-service, which we all have on our iPads, and search for it. Okay, type in Graphical, search for it. And if you don't have it already installed, you can go ahead and do that. Now, you want the one on the left here, the one that has the GW band across it. You don't want the Vernier Graphical Analysis 4. You want Vernier Graphical Analysis with the little GW band. So that's where you'll find the app. Now, I already have the app installed on my iPad. So I'm going to go ahead and open that app up. And when you open up the app, it gives you a ton of options. These are all experiments that I have done over the course of the past few years. I use this app quite a bit. But for this demonstration, we're going to show you how you would import data manually. So let's say you're doing a homework assignment or you're doing a lab and you've collected some data and you have it jotted down in a notebook or on a lab piece of paper and you just want to graph it really quickly. So what you would do is you would hit the New Experiment Plus button on the upper left and a lot of options pop up, but the one we care about right now is manual entry, the very last entry. So if I click that, it brings up a screen that looks like this. Now I just want to take you on a quick tour of the options on this screen. In the upper left, you see that there's a data set. And then next to it, there's a graphing area. And then the upper right, you see the very common share icon. But to the left of the share icon, looks like a grid. This right here gives you options. So if you wanted to just view the graph, for example, you could hit one graph and it would show the graph. You could hit 2 or 3 graphs, and we will show you later in the year, if we get into this a little more, when you might want to look at 2 graphs and 3 graphs. But the bottom four, the fourth and the fifth option, are the ones you want to be concerned with. You have graph and table, which shows both side by side, for your data table and your graph, or you can just choose the table. Okay. I typically like to see the graph get built as I put data in, so you can just choose. You can just choose the side by side option. Okay. Also, down at the bottom corner of the graph, on the lower left-hand corner of the graphing area, you see this little icon that has a little scatter plot icon. It has different options on here. We'll be coming back to that in just a bit. Okay, so that's an important thing, important tool we're going to have. All right, so let's just do an example and show you different options you have. Let's say, for example, you were doing a lab and you collected some data. I happen to have some data already collected here. Let's say in chemistry class we were tracking the temperature of a reaction as it progressed over time. Okay, and we took down this data. So we have a reaction 1 and we have a reaction 2. So if I wanted to import this data in, I would go back to Graphical. Now to make life a little easier for you, you may want to split screen your iPad. So I'm going to pull up my menu from the bottom. My data was in Notability, so I'm going to gently pull Notability out and split screen my iPad. What that allows me to do now is it allows me to view the data that I want to graph. And a split screen. Okay, so what I have here is I have reaction temperatures versus time. I'm going to look at data set 1, and I've got time versus temperature. Okay, so in the data table, you see where it says X and Y, we want to go ahead and name these so that our graph is populated properly. So next to the X, you see 3 little dots. That's called an ellipses. If you click on that, it's going to bring up the option for column options, and we can go ahead and name our column. So instead of X, we're going to call it time. And then where it says units, we can go ahead and put minutes, MIN. And you'll see that once that happens, look at the bottom of the graph. The graph is now populated as time. It's labeled. Do the same thing for the Y. Click next to the Y in the ellipses. And now you can type in what Y is. Y is going to be temperature. And my units are going to be Celsius. So I can go ahead and type that in. And you can see now the y-axis is also populated. Okay. Now I want to show you what it would look like. What your screen actually looks like side by side. If you're just viewing graphical, it will look like that. But if you split screen, it's pretty nice. It puts it on top of itself, so it's easier for you to view. Okay, now let's go ahead and let's just click in here and let's load some data. All right, let's go ahead and put the data in slowly. So I've got my first one is 10, so I'm just gonna, oh, sorry, to get into the data, you just double tap the box, right? So if I double tap under time, it now allows me to edit under time. I can put in my data. So this will take a little bit, just bear with me. You keep hitting the next button, type 8, hit the next button, 6.77, and you just keep going through your table and keep hitting next. And something that's kind of cool, I'm going to show you, I'm going to bring down my keyboard. You can see that as I put the data in, my graph is already starting to be built, which is kind of neat. Okay, I just double tapped on the box and it brought me back to populating the data. So we got 11 and 7.81. Now I just go ahead and move my data up for myself. 14 and 8.84. 6 and 6.08. You can feel free if you're watching this video to skip ahead, because I know this is very exciting watching me put data in. 8.15. And we've got 7 and 6.42. And our very last data point is going to be 5 and 5.73. Okay. Now, at this point, I don't really need to look at my data anymore, except for the fact that I need to realize that it's reaction temperatures versus time. That's my title. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and leave split screen and just show you what graphical will look like. Now that's pretty neat, right? That's pretty good looking data right there. We probably want to put a title on our graph. So now if we want to do some options on our graph, on the lower left-hand corner of the graph, there's a little icon. If you click that, if you go to graph options, there's a space for you to put title in. So we can say temperature of a reaction over time. It's a good title. And if we go back, we can see now that we have a title on top of our graph. And one of the other things that I know that your teacher wants you to do when you have a graph like this is to do a line of best fit. Now, normally, if you were doing it on paper, you would pull out a ruler and you would make your best guess as to what it is. The nice thing about the iPad is it just computes it, and it's a perfect line of best fit. It's a perfect average. So if you click on that same icon, you see where it says Apply Curve Fit. If you click that, it'll throw in a line of best fit for you. Now, this curve fit is able to be changed. Okay, you could choose different types of mathematical functions to relate the data. But if you look at our data is definitely a straight line. So you choose linear, and then over here on the right side, you can see it gives you some pretty important information. It tells you y equals mx plus b. M, if you remember from math class, m in that equation is the slope. So we actually have a value for our slope, which is helpful. And in class, your teacher may walk through what the slope might mean in a different reaction and how you can use it. But this is an example of some data, okay? Now, I want to show you something kind of cool. That is if you want to do one data set, but if you remember, we had two data sets. So if I go back to Notability, I also have another reaction that we took some temperatures for. This reaction, reaction 2. So it would be kind of neat if we could show all that data on the same graph, and you can. You can do that. So if I click, you see where it says data set 1, if I click the ellipses next to that, it allows me to add a new data set. And I can slide it back and forth. And you see that the nice thing is since I labeled the first data set, it keeps the same labels again. So I don't have to put in time, I don't have to put in temperature, it's all ready to go. And my graph, if you notice my graph was just wiped out, it's ready to receive the new data. If I tap double tap on time. Now I can start entering my data. So once again, I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to hit next, 9.14. Again, this is one of those very tantalizing minutes or so where you can sit here and watch me manually enter data. Or if you want to skip ahead, sorry, that was a mistake. See what I did there? I accidentally typed in 13.874. I screwed up. So if I just double tap back on that, I can delete it. Okay, I hit next. And now I can carry on. So I made a little mistake there. No problem, easy to fix. If you want to go ahead and skip ahead about half a minute, and then you can see what the result is. I want to show you, if you're still with me, that the data is populated. And this looks a lot different than our last graph. This doesn't seem to follow a straight line. That's okay. You're going to have some data that's not a straight line. We have 14. We have the next one is 6 and 6.12. Now this might seem a little, what's the word I'm looking for? Cumbersome. Cumbersome is a fancy word for if something seems like it's harder than it needs to be, or if it's kind of hard to do. It might seem that way at first, but when you realize that you would be jotting these down on paper and scaling your own axes and having to put all these dots down on a piece of paper, trust me, this saves you a ton of time over doing that. Okay, I'm going to end my split screen and look at what this graph looks like now. Okay, this is a totally different looking graph now. In fact, I'm just going to show you what it looks like if I just show the graph. So in the upper right hand corner where that little graph icon was, if you just click on one graph, it's pretty nice, right? It shows you that it definitely is a curve. So now if I wanted to, for example, if I wanted to put a line of best fit, now that linear doesn't really seem too good. I could try proportional, quadratic, ooh, hello, quadratic. Now that is a very nice curve fit, okay? That's very useful. Now I also want to show you that you can actually put both sets of data on the same graph. So if I click on either of the axes, if I click on temperature, if I click on the temperature icon, once again, just clicking on the word temperature, Celsius, do you see how it gives me options? So right now it's showing data set 1. If I uncheck that, the graph goes blank. If I check data set 1, it's going to go ahead and show me data set 1. If I click on temperature again and I check data set 2, it's actually showing me both of those sets of data on the same graph. Now this looks a little confusing, but I'm showing both sets of data. That's pretty cool. We could also view two graphs if we wanted to. This is where this comes in handy. If we're viewing two graphs right here, I could go ahead and show data set 2 on the bottom one. And I could look at both graphs at the same time. I could do lines of best fit on both graphs. I can do the linear line there, and I could do the same thing on the bottom, but do quadratic, because we said quadratic was a good fit. And I could look at both of those at the same time. That's pretty useful. It can be a little confusing. Let me back out now, right? Just go back to one graph. I want to show you something that's pretty neat. Now with this graph, you can manipulate it. So just like you would on your smartphone or on any app in the iPad, if you pinch the screen, it'll zoom in or out. So right now I'm pinching my fingers together, both left and right and up and down, and you can see that I could zoom out quite a bit. Okay, I can zoom out quite a bit, and I could see maybe what would happen if my time was 100 minutes, and I can look out further. So if you were to do this and say you got your scale all screwed up and you're getting a little frustrated because you want to get back to a good scale, the nice thing about Graphical is you can just go ahead and double tap. If I double tap the screen, boom, it snaps back to an auto scale, which is very helpful. Okay, I want to show you one more thing about how we can manipulate the graph, which is kind of neat. Let's say the teacher asked you a question, what was the temperature at 7.5 minutes? Well, you don't have 7.5 minutes. You have data. If you click on the graph, you can get the data at 7 minutes and you can get the data at 8 minutes. But if I'm clicking right now between 7 and 8 and it won't let me do it. It's only showing me the data points. So what you want to do here, if I click the little X, it goes away. What you want to do here is down on the graph options, you can turn on interpolate. Interpolate is a fancy mathematical word that means basically estimating between values. Okay, so right now, if I want to know what 7.5 was, I can go ahead and click on the graph anywhere. And I can click and drag this line anywhere along the graph. So now if you notice, it's at 7.4 there. At 7.504 minutes, which is 7.5, it's going to show me, oh, the temperature was 6.599 Celsius. Okay, so that's a useful tool. You can also figure out what data was past the data that you measured. So you could predict. It might say, what was the temperature change at 1 minute? Well, we don't have any data less than 4 minutes, but we can go ahead and predict it at 1 minute using that. Okay. So I hope this video you found helpful, and I hope it's something that maybe you could reference again in the future if you had to graph for a lab or for a worksheet. And the nice thing about this here is when I'm done with my graph, let's say, for example, I had this data and I was supposed to turn it in on the lab. Now all I have to do here is I could either take a screenshot or up in the right-hand corner, I could say image of graphs, and I could save it to my camera roll. Save image. And now it's in my camera roll. So now I can submit to Schoology or any sort of platform, or I can email it if I needed to. Very useful, very powerful tool. Thanks for watching. Hope you found this helpful. See you in class.